Hello Aviation Nation, welcome back to another fast-diving episode of Cowboy's Vintage Wings, your premier channel for military aviation history. Join us as we turn on the sirens, deploy the dive brakes, roll over inverted, and take you deep into a steep dive into the annals of World War II history. Today we explore an aviation legend that is ingrained real deep into our collective psyche, a machine both terrifying and ingenious. We're talking about the Junkers JU87, better known as the Stuka. Stuka is not an actual word but a German contraction of Sturzkampfflugzeug. It translates in English to dive combat aircraft, or simply put, dive bomber. This legendary aircraft, a symbol of German might in the early years of World War II, left an undeniable mark on history. The Stuka wasn't just an airplane, it was a complete major weapon system designed to maximize its impact beyond the physical reach of its bombs and have third-order effects deep into the realm of psychological warfare. Imagine, if you will, the terrifying shriek as it plummeted from the sky. Imagine the ground shaking as its bombs detonated. That was the reality for those who faced the Stuka's wrath. We'll explore the Stuka's design, we'll examine its role in the blitzkrieg, we'll witness its triumphs and its failures. We'll even hear the story of Hans Rudel, one of the Luftwaffe's most decorated Stuka pilots. So buckle up, Aviation Nation, prepare for a wild ride through the history of the Stuka, the screaming eagle of the Third Reich. Hold on tight. The Stuka is a German dive bomber and ground attack aircraft. Designed by Hermann Pohlmann, it first flew in 1935. By any modern-day standards, it's easy to conclude the Stuka was not a beautiful aircraft. It wasn't sleek or fast like the Spitfire or the Messerschmitt Bf 109, but it was effective. By the start of World War II, many consider the Stuka obsolete and outdated. The Stuka was designed for one purpose: to deliver bombs with pinpoint accuracy, and it did that with terrifying efficiency. The Stuka had a distinctive inverted gull wing design. This gave the pilot a clear view of the target below. The fixed undercarriage, while not aerodynamic, was sturdy and reliable. It could take the punishment of rough landings. Furthermore, the Stuka had explosive charges in the landing gear that the pilot could activate to jettison the landing gear and perform a belly landing in inadequate terrain, or in the case of ditching or water landing. It was also cheap to produce, important in a long war. The cockpit was cramped, designed for a two-man crew. The pilot sat in front, while the rear gunner radio operator sat on the back facing backwards and manned a single machine gun. This was the Stuka's main weakness. It lacked the speed and maneuverability to defend itself against enemy fighters. The Stuka was powered by a single Junkers JU87B engine. This gave it a top speed of around 255 miles per hour, slow by fighter standards. But the Stuka wasn't built for speed. It was built to deliver its deadly payload. General Ernst Udet, a World War I ace and famous interwar period stunt pilot and international aviation pioneer, was instrumental in the development of German dive bombers. Inspired by American Curtiss Hawk dive bombers, Udet championed the concept of precision bombing from steep dives. His vision laid the foundation for the Stuka's design, making it a fearsome weapon of war. To unleash its deadly accuracy, the Stuka followed a precise diving procedure. As the target approached, the pilot would climb to altitude and then roll the aircraft inverted, beginning a steep dive, sometimes as much as 80 degrees. At the start of the dive, the pilot activated the dive brakes, special panels on the wings that slowed the aircraft and stabilized its descent, preventing dangerous acceleration. With the nose pointed directly at the target, the pilot used a specialized bomb sight to line up the shot. At the calculated release point, the pilot dropped the bomb, often from just a few thousand feet above the ground. Immediately after release, the pilot triggered an automatic pull-up system or manually hauled back on the control column, enduring intense G-forces as the Stuka leveled out. This demanding sequence required nerves of steel and precise timing, but it allowed the Stuka to deliver its bombs with devastating accuracy, striking fear into those below. The Stuka's primary weapon was its bombs. It could carry a variety of ordnance, including 550-pound bombs and lighter anti-personnel bombs. The Stuka's dive bombing technique allowed for incredible accuracy. The pilot would aim the aircraft at the target and then initiate a steep dive. As the Stuka plummeted towards the earth, it would sound a terrifying shriek. This was the sound of the Jericho trumpets. These sirens, mounted on the landing gear, were designed to strike fear into the hearts of the enemy. And they were incredibly effective. The sound of a diving Stuka became synonymous with terror. Beyond its physical arsenal, the Stuka itself became a weapon of propaganda. Its terrifying image and sound were used by the Nazis to demoralize enemies and boost their own morale. The Stuka was also armed with two 7.92mm machine guns in the wings. These were primarily defensive weapons, used to fend off enemy fighters, but they could also be used against ground targets. However, the Stuka's lack of speed and agility made it vulnerable to attack. Later in the war, the Stuka was equipped with 37mm cannons, which proved devastating against tanks on the Eastern Front. These cannons allowed the Stuka to destroy heavily armored vehicles, making it a formidable tank killer. One of the Stuka's most innovative features was its air brake system. These air brakes, mounted under the wings, allowed the aircraft to maintain stability and reduce speed during steep dives. Additionally, the Stuka was equipped with an auto-leveling system. This system automatically pulled the aircraft out of a dive, ensuring the pilot could focus on targeting without risking a crash. Together, the air brakes and auto-leveling system made the Stuka a precision dive-bombing machine, feared by its enemies both for its destructive power and its psychological impact. Before the Stuka terrorized Europe in World War II, it had its first taste of combat in the skies over Spain. The Spanish Civil War, which raged from 1936 to 1939, became a testing ground for new military technologies and tactics. Among the forces aiding Francisco Franco's nationalists was the German Condor Legion, an elite unit sent by Adolf Hitler to support the fascist cause and, more importantly, to test Germany's burgeoning arsenal of war. The Junkers JU87, or Stuka, was introduced to the battlefield during this conflict. While its numbers were limited, just a handful of prototypes, the Spanish Civil War became the perfect proving ground for the Stuka's revolutionary dive-bombing techniques. The Stuka's role was primarily tactical. It was used to destroy key enemy positions with pinpoint accuracy, including bridges, supply lines, and entrenched troops. Its ability to dive directly at a target and release its payload with precision was a game-changer. Pilots learned to exploit the Stuka's strengths while also confronting its weaknesses, such as its vulnerability to enemy fighters. One notable operation came during the bombing of Guernica in 1937. While the Heinkel HE-111 and Dornier bombers carried out the majority of the attack, the Stuka played a supporting role. The destruction of Guernica and the terror it inspired revealed the psychological potential of aerial bombardment, a lesson that would be fully realized in the campaigns to come. The Spanish Civil War also served as a laboratory for refining dive-bombing tactics. German engineers and tacticians closely observed the Stuka's performance, tweaking its design and training programs based on real-world combat experience. The Jericho trumpets, for instance, were not yet implemented, but the psychological dimension of the Stuka's dive bombing was already becoming evident. By the time the Spanish Civil War ended, the Stuka had established itself as a fearsome weapon. For the Germans, the war had been an invaluable rehearsal for the blitzkrieg tactics that would soon plunge Europe into chaos. And for the Stuka, Spain was its baptism by fire, a prelude to the terror it would unleash in the years to come. Section 5. Blitzkrieg's hammer blow, crushing Poland and France. The Stuka played a key role in the blitzkrieg, Germany's lightning war strategy. The blitzkrieg relied on speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. The Stuka, with its ability to deliver precision strikes against enemy troops, tanks, and fortifications, was the perfect weapon for this type of warfare. In the invasion of Poland in 1939, the Stuka proved its worth. Stuka attacks on Polish airfields crippled the Polish Air Force in the opening days of the war. Stukas then targeted Polish troop concentrations and communication lines, sowing chaos and disrupting Polish defenses. The Stuka was equally effective in the invasion of France in 1940. Stukas blasted French fortifications along the Maginot Line, allowing German tanks to break through. They proved devastating against French and British troops retreating to Dunkirk, turning the retreat into a desperate scramble for survival. The Stuka had become the spearhead of the blitzkrieg. Section 6. The Stuka meets its match, the Battle of Britain. The Stuka, once the vanguard of German air power, faced its greatest challenge during the Battle of Britain in 1940. Initially, the Stuka was tasked with striking a critical blow against British defenses, including raids on radar stations along the southern coast of England. These radar installations were vital to the Royal Air Force's ability to detect and intercept incoming German aircraft. At first, the Stukas achieved moderate success, damaging several radar stations and causing brief disruptions in Britain's early warning system. But the Stuka's design, a slow-moving dive bomber with limited defensive armament, soon became a liability. The British Spitfires and Hurricanes, faster and more agile, quickly turned the skies into a deadly arena for the Stukas. British pilots learned to exploit the Stuka's weaknesses, diving into formations and picking off the bombers with precision. The Stuka's once terrifying siren now seemed like a herald of its own destruction. The losses were staggering. By the end of the campaign, Stuka squadrons had been decimated, with many aircraft and experienced crews lost. The Luftwaffe, recognizing the Stuka's unsuitability for operations in contested airspace, made the difficult decision to withdraw it from the Battle of Britain. This marked a turning point in the Stuka's career. The aircraft that had symbolized German dominance in Poland and France now found itself outmatched and vulnerable. The retreat of the Stukas signaled a shift in the air war over Europe as the tide began to turn against the Luftwaffe. The Battle of Britain proved that the Stuka, while devastating in the right conditions, was not effective without establishing air superiority first. It was a lesson the Germans would not soon forget. The scorching sands of North Africa set the stage for one of the Stuka's most challenging and dramatic chapters. As the Luftwaffe shifted its focus to the Mediterranean theater, the Ju-87 Stuka became a crucial asset in the Desert War, supporting the Afrika Korps under General Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox. Operating in the harsh, unforgiving environment of the North African desert, Stuka crews faced relentless heat, blinding sandstorms, and a landscape that offered little cover or margin for error. Despite these obstacles, the Stuka's precision dive-bombing capabilities gave the Desert Fox a formidable weapon against Allied armor and supply columns. Its infamous siren, now echoing across barren dunes, struck terror into the hearts of enemy troops. Notable missions included attacks on British convoys during the Siege of Tobruk, and the fierce battles at Gazala and El Alamein. Stuka squadrons played a pivotal role in disrupting Allied reinforcements and supply lines, often tipping the balance in Rommel's favor during the early stages of the campaign. Yet, the desert presented unique tactical challenges. The blazing sun made camouflage nearly impossible, and maintenance crews struggled to keep engines running as sand infiltrated every mechanism. Pilots had to adapt their tactics, flying at dawn or dusk to avoid enemy fighters and maximize the element of surprise. As the Allies improved their air defenses and gained air superiority, Stuka losses mounted. The wide-open terrain left them vulnerable to interception, and the relentless Allied push eventually forced the Luftwaffe to withdraw its remaining dive bombers from the theater. Still, the legacy of the Stuka in North Africa endures, a symbol of adaptability and terror on the battlefield, and a testament to the pilots who braved both enemy fire and the merciless desert itself. As the war raged across Europe, the Mediterranean became a crucial battleground, and the Stuka found a new stage for its deadly theatrics. In early 1941, the Luftwaffe shifted its focus to the tiny island of Malta, a strategic outpost that threatened Axis supply lines to North Africa. At the heart of the Axis aerial offensive were the infamous Stuka dive bombers, tasked with breaking British resistance and crippling the Royal Navy. The Stukas swooped down in screaming dives, unleashing waves of precision attacks on airfields, harbors, and ships. Their most infamous target, HMS Illustrious, a British aircraft carrier providing air cover for convoys. On January 10, 1941, Illustrious was caught in Grand Harbor, Valletta, as Stukas dove through a hail of anti-aircraft fire. Using coordinated attack waves, the German pilots focused their bombs on the carrier's flight deck and superstructure. The results were devastating. 6 direct hits tore into Illustrious, setting the ship ablaze and killing dozens of crew. Fires raged below decks, and the battered carrier barely managed to limp into dry dock for emergency repairs. British sailors recalled the terror of the Stuka's sirens and the relentless accuracy of their bombs. For the Allies, the attack on Illustrious was a grim reminder of the Stuka's power and the vulnerability of even the mightiest warships. From the Axis perspective, the Malta Blitz and the near destruction of Illustrious was a tactical victory. The attacks disrupted Allied convoys and delayed much-needed reinforcements to North Africa. But despite the damage, Malta held out, its defenders rallying under constant bombardment. The siege became a symbol of resilience for the British, while for the Axis, it was proof of the Stuka's enduring menace. The strikes against Malta and HMS Illustrious underscored the evolving tactics of aerial warfare in the Mediterranean. It was a theater where the Stuka's scream echoed across the sea, and where the outcome of the war in North Africa often hung in the balance. The Eastern Front was a brutal and vast theater of war, stretching from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Black Sea in the south. Here, the scale of conflict was unprecedented, and the Stuka dive bomber became a key instrument in the German military's arsenal. The Stuka played a significant role in the German campaigns against the Soviet Union, serving as both a psychological weapon and a precision strike aircraft. The harsh conditions and vast distances of the Eastern Front presented unique challenges for the Luftwaffe. Pilots faced not only fierce Soviet resistance but also bitter cold, treacherous weather, and the logistical nightmare of operating far from supply bases. Despite these obstacles, the Stuka proved to be a formidable weapon, especially in the early years of the campaign. Stuka squadrons were instrumental in the early successes of Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. As German armored columns surged forward, Stukas provided relentless close air support, attacking Soviet tanks, artillery and supply lines with deadly accuracy. Their combined arms approach struck terror into Soviet enemy troops, causing panic and disarray before the bombs even fell. The Stuka's precision bombing capabilities were crucial in the Battle of Kiev, where they helped encircle and destroy large Soviet forces, contributing to one of the largest encirclements in military history. Stuka units also played vital roles in the battles of Smolensk, Sevastopol, and the Crimea, where their ability to strike fortified positions and moving columns gave the Wehrmacht a significant tactical edge. However, as the war dragged on, the Stuka's vulnerabilities became more apparent. The aircraft's slow speed and lack of maneuverability made it easy prey for increasingly capable Soviet fighters. The Soviet Air Force, initially caught off guard, rapidly improved its tactics and equipment, fielding new aircraft like the Yak-1 and Yak-3, and deploying experienced pilots to counter the Luftwaffe's dominance. The Stuka's lack of speed and agility made it increasingly vulnerable to these Soviet fighters, and losses began to mount. By the time of the Battle of Stalingrad, the Stuka's effectiveness had diminished, but the aircraft still played a critical role in the desperate struggle for the city. Stuka units, including the famed Sturzkampfgeschwader II, led by Hans Ulrich Rudel, were tasked with relentless bombing raids against Soviet positions, supply depots and river crossings. Their missions were often flown in support of the encircled German Sixth Army, targeting Soviet strongpoints and armored concentrations. One of their key missions was to disrupt Soviet supply lines across the Volga River. Stuka pilots launched repeated attacks on ferries and barges, aiming to cut off reinforcements and supplies reaching the embattled Soviet defenders. Hans Ulrich Rudel recalls,
We flew sortie after sortie, sometimes up to 10 missions a day. Our orders were clear: stop the Soviets from crossing the Volga at any cost.
Stuka pilots often flew at dangerously low altitudes to increase bombing accuracy, braving intense anti-aircraft fire and the ever-present threat of Soviet fighters. Their courage and skill were tested to the limit in these high-risk missions. Their efforts provided crucial support to the encircled German Sixth Army, destroying Soviet tanks and strongpoints during the bitter street fighting. In the chaos of urban combat, the Stuka's ability to deliver pinpoint strikes was invaluable, but the cost was high. Stuka losses mounted as Soviet air defenses improved and fighter opposition intensified. Many crews were lost during these perilous missions, and the Luftwaffe's ability to replace them dwindled as the war dragged on. Yet the Stuka remained a symbol of German air power on the Eastern Front, even as its dominance faded. Its psychological impact on both Axis and Soviet troops was profound, feared by enemies, revered by allies. The story of the Stuka on the Eastern Front is one of both triumph and tragedy, marked by early victories and later defeats. From the vast encirclements at Kiev and Smolensk, to the desperate defense of Stalingrad and the grinding attrition of Kursk, the Stuka's legacy is a testament to the brutal and unforgiving nature of the war in the East. Its impact was felt by both Axis and Soviet forces, shaping the course of battles and the fate of millions. I bet you didn't know why the legendary Stuka was eventually replaced by the formidable FW-190, and how that shift changed the face of Luftwaffe tactics forever. As the war progressed, the Stuka, once the terror of the skies, began to show its age. Increasing Allied air superiority and improved anti-aircraft defenses exposed the Stuka's vulnerabilities. It was slow, lightly armored, and struggled to survive in contested airspace. Enter the Focke-Wulf FW-190 Werger. Faster, more agile, and heavily armed, The FW-190 could not only dive bomb but also dogfight with Allied fighters. This operational flexibility allowed the Luftwaffe to adapt its tactics, shifting from precision dive bombing to hit-and-run ground attacks and air superiority missions. The transition marked a turning point. The Luftwaffe's reliance on the Stuka's psychological impact gave way to the FW-190's raw performance and survivability, fundamentally altering how German pilots engaged the enemy. But even as the Stuka faded from the front lines, its legacy, and that of its most famous pilot, remained. Today, we have a special guest on our channel, Oberst Hans Ulrich Rudel. Colonel Rudel was one of the most famous Stuka pilots during World War II. Hans Ulrich Rudel, Germany's most highly decorated combat pilot, despite the fact he only shot down 9 enemy aircraft, he destroyed the equivalent of more than 3 Soviet tank corps. Rudel was credited with the destruction of 519 tanks, 1 battleship, 1 cruiser, 70 landing craft, and 150 artillery emplacements. He flew over 2,500 missions and was awarded the Knight's Cross with golden oak leaves, swords, and diamonds. Let's hear his story from his own perspective.
Hello, Guten Tag, my name is Hans Rudel. I remember the first time I flew the Stuka. The power, the precision, it was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The dive brakes, the siren, it was all designed to strike fear into the hearts of our enemies. But it wasn't just about the machine. It was about the men who flew it on my wing. The camaraderie, the sense of duty. We were a brotherhood, bound by the skies and the battles we fought together.
Hans Rudel's story is not just a testament to the Stuka's capabilities, but also a reflection of the human spirit. Despite the dangers he and his fellow pilots pushed through, driven by a sense of purpose and loyalty, Rudel's extraordinary achievements in the cockpit have made him a legend in the annals of military aviation.
Each mission was a test of skill and courage. We knew the risks, but we also knew what was at stake. The Stuka was more than a weapon, it was a symbol of our resolve. Every time we took off, we were acutely aware of the dangers, but we were also determined to succeed.
Hans Rudel's legacy serves as a powerful reminder of the bravery and dedication of Stuka pilots. His experiences provide a personal glimpse into the trials and triumphs of those who flew these remarkable aircraft. As we honor the technological advancements and strategic impact of the Stuka, we must also remember the indomitable spirit of the men who piloted them.
Flying the Stuka was an honor and a challenge. It demanded everything from us, physically and mentally. From the high G-forces to the mental strain of diving straight into the enemy flak, we were challenged. But in those moments of extreme pressure, we found our strength. We were not just pilots, we were warriors of the sky.
The story of Hans Rudel and his fellow Stuka pilots is a poignant chapter in the history of aviation. Their courage and resilience continue to inspire, reminding us of the profound human element behind the machinery of war.
There was one mission on the Eastern Front where I was forced to land behind enemy lines. The weather deteriorated and forced me to land on a narrow road in the forest. The noise of my engine attracted Russian soldiers nearby. My rear gunner put his machine gun to work like a ground vehicle. Instead of abandoning our ship, we had to taxi my Stuka for miles to reach the German base. Imagine the face of the German sentry when we arrived taxiing the aircraft down the main road. It was a harrowing experience, but it showed the resilience and determination we all had. Vielen Dank, Schutz.
As we conclude our exploration of the Stuka, let us carry forward the lessons of bravery, sacrifice, and the enduring human spirit. Thank you for climbing on board Cowboy's Vintage Wings and joining us on this wild ride on the wings of the Stuka. This is Cowboy Vintage Wings signing out. Keep your eyes scanning for enemy fighters and don't forget to pull out before it's too late. Cowboy out.